wonderful companion. But when the doll begins to move on its own, it soon reveals its malevolent nature. It will take the expertise of renowned demonologists and priests to help free them from the entity that now infests their lives. Will they make it out alive before it's too late? This is the untold story of Annabelle, the demonic doll of Connecticut. And this story just may make you think twice about your keepsakes. Our story begins in 1970. 25-year-old Deirdre Bernard has recently moved into her first apartment with her two friends, an engaged couple named Laura Clifton and Cal Randell. Her mother had bought her a gift for her birthday and hoped that it would keep her daughter's spirits up and spread joy to her new home as she pursued her education in nursing. Deirdre loved the gift, finding its rosy red cheeks with hair to match to be a fun companion for her new journey in life. Shortly after admiring her new doll, she placed it on her bed with its arms and legs out. For the next several days, it became routine for Deirdre to come home from her studies, spend time with the doll, and then place her back in the exact same position, with its arms and legs out on her bed. Oddly, however, after the first several days of this new routine, the young woman began to notice that something wasn't quite right. Every morning she would lay her doll back on her bed before heading to school, with its arms and legs stretched out. Yet every night upon her return, she would find the doll in different positions. Sometimes the doll's legs would be crossed, and other times its arms. And as the days went on, it would even start to be seen in different parts of her room, oftentimes with its arms pointed outward. But Deirdre's room would not be its only occupied space. The doll would begin to be found in various positions all over the apartment. And Deirdre wasn't the only person who was witnessing these bizarre manifestations. Her two roommates would seem to bear witness to them as well. One evening, Deirdre returned home with her roommate Laura, who was also a trainee nurse at the time, and her fiancé Cal. Upon opening the door to their apartment, they would find the doll kneeling before them, in a chair, facing the door, as if it had been waiting for them to return. This not only scared everyone, but especially Deirdre, because she knew for a fact that as per her routine, that she had placed the doll on her bed that very morning. It had inexplicably
Worry about theft of your mail.
moved on its own. To try and make sense of all this, they moved the doll and then tried to reposition it back into its original kneeling stance, the same one they had seen when initially walking through the door. But each time they tried to replicate the position due to the design of the doll, this proved impossible. The movement of the doll, as well as its position now, left the trio at a loss for words. The only conclusion they could draw from the situation was that some kind of force was manipulating the doll. Deirdre would place the doll back in its normal position on her bed for the night, but this experience would be far from the last for all of them. Just several days following the previously mentioned happening, a new phenomenon began to manifest. Little notes, written in pencil, on parchment paper, began to be found randomly throughout the apartment, and at random times. The messages included such phrases as "help us" or "help Cal." But despite the messages' urgent requests for help, no one was able to figure out just what they were referring to. because none of them were experiencing an urgent situation, including Cal. And weirder still, none of them kept parchment paper or pencils. This realization just further deepened the mystery that was now unfolding before their very eyes. At first, they believed that possibly someone was breaking into their apartment to play pranks on them. So in order to check if this indeed was the case, Deirdre and Laura began leaving marks around the windows and doors. Marks that, if disturbed, would show later on. They also rearranged their furniture in an effort to ensure that if anyone was entering their apartment unannounced, that they would leave a trace. But again, later that night, upon their return from their studies, none of the furniture had been disturbed, nor had any of their marks. Yet, the doll had moved rooms. Frightened and perplexed at this point, the trio tried to come up with some potential solutions. But as they individually gave them thought, day in and day out, the doll would continue to move on its own accord, positions, and places. One day, the three would return yet again, as per their routine, to find the doll yet again in another part of the apartment. But this time, there was something different. This time, they found it sat with some kind of liquid on its hands. Upon a closer look, they were even more frightened, because the liquid appeared to be blood. And this blood was all over the doll's hands, as well as 3 distinct dots of blood were also on its chest. Terrified, the three sat in the living room and tried to figure out some kind of game plan on how to handle the paranormal situation they found themselves in. Deirdre would grab a phone book from the cupboard and begin flicking through the pages as the group talked. One of her fingers would finally rest on a psychic medium's number. During the brief call, they would explain that they had been experiencing ghostly type activity within their apartment, but they did not inform her about the doll specifically. She would arrive the following day to see what she could do to help. As she walked through the apartment, she began to explain to Laura and Deirdre about the spirits she felt had inhabited the building. The ladies would eventually make their way to Deirdre's room, where the doll currently sat. They asked what the medium felt in regards to the doll. Upon examining it, she said she felt a strong presence surrounding the object, but informed the two that she would need to conduct a seance around it in order to discover more information. So, a seance was agreed to. As the ritual was conducted around the doll, the medium began to divulge information to Laura and Deirdre. She claimed that she had channeled the spirit of a 7-year-old little girl named Annabelle Higgins. She said that Annabelle used to play in the area long before the houses and apartment buildings were there, back when all that existed were fields. Many innocent and happy hours were passed here, until suddenly they ended. Annabelle was confused as to what had happened to her, to which the medium interpreted to be her death. And since her death, the child had wandered the place she was the happiest, the fields.
Never sue the other.
Once the apartments were built upon them, the halls quickly became a lonely place for her to haunt. With the lifestyles of most modern people requiring work most of the time, this meant that Annabelle had no one to play with. But then, one day, 2 young women brought with them a playful-looking doll. Finally, she had something to play with again, and more so, she had the comfort of 2 young women who she believed would be more empathetic and accepting of her and would allow her to play with them. Through the vessel of the medium, Annabelle would ask if she could live in the doll and be with Deirdre and Laura. Touched by the young girl's story, the two women agreed, and following the seance, they would name the doll Annabelle in the young girl's honor. A truly nice gesture from the two of them. However, upon agreeing to have Annabelle inhabit the doll and stay with them, is when the haunting truly began. Convinced now that they were sharing a space with Annabelle, they began to treat the doll as a living, breathing person. It was no longer a lifeless toy, but the young and lonely little girl. Regardless of the two ladies' compassion, Cal was not so convinced. He sensed that something was very off in regards to this entire situation, and believed that no good would come of it. He thought the doll could possibly be some kind of trickster or a conduit that disguised its true intentions. And in time, perhaps, he was right. In the weeks following the seance, Cal began to feel ill at most times of the day, with no rational origin. And at night, every night, he began to have horrible nightmares. These experiences culminated with Cal waking up one night to find Annabelle gliding over his body. Before he could react, the doll's hands were on either side of his neck, strangling him, its large, void-like eyes staring into his, as it sought to steal his life. In a later interview, Cal would describe the event like this: "While I was lying there, I suddenly woke up, and something seemed wrong to me. I looked around the room, but nothing was out of place. But then I looked down towards my feet, and I saw the rag doll Annabelle. It was slowly gliding up my body. It moved over my chest and stopped. Then it put its two arms out. One arm touched one side of my neck, and the other touched the other side, like it was making an electrical connection. Then I began to be strangled. I was writhing and trying to push the doll off my chest, but I might as well have been pushing on a wall, because it wouldn't move. As hard as he pushed against the doll, it would not budge, and just as he felt like he was slipping into unconsciousness, with every fiber of his being, he pushed back, and finally was able to throw the doll away from him. However, despite a terror-struck but relieved Cal, this would be far from the last time that Annabelle would seek to destroy. One night, when Deirdre was out of the apartment, Laura and Cal were spending time together in the living room. This relaxing time, however, was quickly interrupted with a large banging sound that emanated from Deirdre's room. The couple, confused as to what it could be, rushed to find the source. With Cal headed in first, they threw the door open, expecting to see someone. But to their surprise, they were only met with the icy gaze of Annabelle. She was staring at them from the floor, as if she had been tossed aside by someone. Cal walked over to the doll and went to pick it up, but suddenly he dropped Annabelle and screamed in pain. The young man winced in agony as white-hot slashes lashed his chest. A small pool of blood began to form in the middle of his shirt as he frantically darted towards the door. Laura was paralyzed with fear as her boyfriend had been attacked by something that neither of them could see. The two would run out of the room and back to the living room as soon as possible, praying to God that this force wasn't pursuing them. When they reached the sofa, Laura pulled up Cal's blood-soaked shirt to find several large gashes on his chest that looked like claw marks. By now, it was becoming increasingly clear that Annabelle sought to harm them. Upon informing Deirdre of what had happened while she was gone, when she arrived back at the apartment, the three, unsure of what else to do, contacted a local priest for help. He would in turn request permission to help from his superiors, and his superiors then passed on the information to paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens were intrigued by what was allegedly taking place and decided to pursue the case in hopes of helping the young trio. Upon arriving at their apartment, hearing each person's testimonies and observing how the space felt, as well as the doll itself, the Warrens believed the happenings to be a result of a heavy demonic infestation. They believed that the demon didn't specifically haunt just their apartment, but rather the building itself and the land around it, that it had seen the doll as a way in. They further explained that the seance had essentially allowed the demon to communicate directly with them, to be invited into their lives. All of those who were present and taking place in the ritual were highly vulnerable spiritually, and this opened them up to manipulation from the demon, which spun a false narrative that it was instead the spirit of little, lonely Annabelle. Following the seance, Deirdre and Laura had paid credence to the doll instead of ignoring it, which only fed the demon more energy. It would then continue to feed off them by manipulating their caring and maternal emotions, since the women were powerless to resist, feeling sorry for the little girl who just wanted to play and be cared for. But once the women had accepted the demon into their lives, they and everyone around them became fair game. The entity no longer had to masquerade itself. It was free to unleash its true form. The couple had sensed that the demon was a very powerful one, given how strong it had continued to grow and infest their lives, given its proclivity to violence. If left unchecked, it would have probably tried to kill one or all of them within the next several weeks. After explaining the seriousness of the situation they found themselves in, the Warrens then contacted a priest they frequently worked with on demonic cases, a man named Father Everett. And Father Everett agreed to come and bless the apartment in an attempt to weaken or drive out the demon entirely. In due time, he too would arrive and conduct the blessing. Once Father Everett was finished and had departed, the Warrens warned the group that if the blessing hadn't driven the demon out, that it at this time was severely weakened, but could potentially come back with a vengeance. Believing the doll to be a conduit, at Deirdre's request, the Warrens took Annabelle with them when they left. Deirdre, Laura, and Cal were now thankfully free of the demonic entity that had plagued their lives. However, Annabelle's story is far from over. The Warrens' problems seemed to begin as soon as Annabelle was stuffed into Ed's briefcase. As the couple was headed home, they began to experience engine issues in their vehicle, which almost resulted in multiple head-on collisions. The demonic entity was causing the power steering and brakes to fail, and even the engine to stall. Once they were able to finally get back home, the doll would be placed within the Warrens' office, specifically within Ed's chair. In the days to come, the Warrens would begin to witness the doll manifesting paranormal activity within their very house. The doll was seen levitating on several occasions and began to frequently teleport to different rooms. And the same little notes, written with pencil on parchment paper, began to appear with all too familiar phrases, such as "help me," and then now, "help us." On top of this, one evening, while she was alone, Lorraine began to hear what she described as loud rolling growls that reverberated within the walls and throughout their entire house. Following this night, the Warrens would be visited by Father Daniel Mills, the Catholic priest the couple were also working with. Upon inquiring about their dealings with the doll, the priest made the mistake of picking up Annabelle, telling her that you are nothing but a rag doll, and you can't hurt anything. As the priest laughed, Ed warned him to never touch or say anything like that to the doll ever again. As he prepared to leave, Lorraine warned the priest to please drive carefully, because her clairvoyance had revealed to her an impending tragedy involving a young priest. Appreciating her concern, but writing the situation off, Father Mills departed the Warrens' residence. A few hours later, he would be involved in a near-fatal car accident, which totaled his vehicle, after his car's brakes had mysteriously failed. Upon receiving the news that the priest was hurt but would survive following the accident, the Warrens decided to lock Annabelle away in hopes that she would never be able to hurt anyone ever again. They would douse her in holy water and place her within a blessed glass case. A blessed crucifix would also be placed on the outside of the box, as well as a warning sign asking anyone who may come across the doll not to touch it. The doll was then placed in their occult item collection. Although Annabelle was now sealed away in hopes that she would no longer harm anyone, her power still seems to affect those who visit her.
When you try go too much.
Lorraine, in several interviews, would refer to Annabelle as one of the most evil objects she had ever come into contact with. Besides numerous bouts of bad luck, some people have even said to have encountered death as a result of meeting her, as well as others losing their minds completely and ending up in psychiatric care for the rest of their earthly existence. One day, a young man visited the Warrens Museum and clearly did not think things through. He went up to and challenged the doll, wanting the worst of whatever it had to offer. He had apparently driven to the museum with his girlfriend on his motorcycle. Upon their departure, 3 hours into their trip home, the man would lose control of his vehicle and would hit a tree at a very high speed. He would die almost instantly due to the impact. His girlfriend, on the other hand, survived, but would remain hospitalized for over a year. Was this particular instance coincidence, or the demon inhabiting the doll inflicting exactly what it had to offer? Although the Warrens did explain how the demon came into the doll, it begs a bit of a deeper question, one that we've seen reoccurring multiple times over our various coverage of haunted objects, and that is how much attention is too much attention or dedication when it comes to objects. Because it seems like depending on your spiritual state and location, that dedication or that imbuement could potentially open a door or create a vessel for something malicious to make its way in. I know that the Warrens are controversial figures, now even in death, but regardless, they are integral to many of the paranormal stories we have and will have covered in the future. But what do you think? Was Annabelle truly possessed? Was the whole case legitimate or a hoax? And with the
He wasn't just a ghost hunter. Dan Rivera was a father, a veteran, a man of quiet faith. And for years, he was entrusted with something few dared to touch, the real-life Annabelle doll. Not the porcelain version from the movies, but a simple, soft, Raggedy Ann-style doll. But according to legend, inside her was something far more sinister. Dan handled her with gloves, prayed before every appearance, warned others not to mock her. And then, on July 13th, 2025, just hours after one of the biggest public showings of Annabelle, Dan Rivera was found dead in his hotel room. No signs of foul play, no prior illness, just gone. Tonight, we walk through Dan's final days, the dark legend of the Annabelle doll, and the stories from others just like you who swear these dolls move. This is not a horror movie. This is real life. Before we begin, if you appreciate stories told with care, with depth, and with truth, we invite you to support this channel. It only takes a second to like this video. And if you want more real-world mysteries, strange histories, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It helps us bring you more of what most people are too afraid to look into. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Before Annabelle, before the headlines, Dan Rivera was just Dan, a father, a U.S. Army veteran, a man from Connecticut with a quiet smile and a deep belief in good and evil. Those who knew him describe him with the same word, kind. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't looking to scare people. He was looking for answers. Dan joined the New England Society for Psychic Research, or NESPR, many years ago. The same group founded by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Not as a performer, but as an investigator, a learner, a believer. He believed deeply that evil was real, and more importantly, that it could hurt people, not through movies, not through superstition, but through what he called spiritual physics. When you open a door, something might walk through. And that's why Dan took his role seriously. He was patient. He never mocked the audience. He never over-dramatized. And when he talked about Annabelle, he always started with one word: respect. He prayed before and after events.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we move when we need to.
To most people, it was just a doll. But Dan knew better. And whether you believed him or not, he believed with all his heart. Before Hollywood made her porcelain, before Dan Rivera ever touched her case, there was this, the original Annabelle doll. A Raggedy Ann made of cloth, red yarn hair, and button eyes. In 1970, a student nurse named Donna received the doll from her mother as a birthday gift. Soon after, Donna and her roommate Angie reported that the doll began to move on its own. It would change positions, appear in different rooms, and sit with its arms and legs crossed unnaturally. They also reported they received handwritten notes on parchment paper that read things like, "Help us," or "Help Lou." One night, Lou, a friend who didn't live there, claimed he was paralyzed in bed while the doll climbed onto his chest and choked him. Afterward, he reported burn-like scratches on his torso, though no open wounds.
7 slashes appeared on his body, 4 on the chest and 3 on the stomach. The blood came right through his shirt.
Disturbed, the roommates contracted a psychic medium who claimed the doll was possessed by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins. The medium said the girl had died on the property and simply wanted to be loved.
Hope?
Ed and Lorraine Warren were contacted, and they disagreed. They claimed it wasn't a ghost at all, but a demon pretending to be a child. They took the doll and placed it in their occult museum in Monroe, Connecticut, inside a locked glass case. A sign on the case still reads, "Warning, positively do not open." Since then, multiple stories have circulated about those who taunted the doll suffering fatal accidents. A young man reportedly mocked the doll, tapped the glass, and died in a motorcycle crash shortly after. A priest who insulted the doll reportedly crashed his car on the way home from the
In a
museum.
brand new car on Route 84. The car went out of control, almost head on into a tractor trailer truck. It was demolished, and the priest was almost killed.
The stories go on. Are they true? That's up to you. But everyone who touched her remembered her. The original Annabelle doll remains sealed in its case at the Warrens Occult Museum, which is currently closed to the public. And every person who encountered her said the same thing. She wasn't just a toy. For decades, the Annabelle doll stayed locked away. She sat in a glass case inside the Warrens Occult Museum, sealed, blessed, untouched. But in 2025, for the first time in years, she was brought out in public again. The New England Society for Psychic Research, NESPR, created a traveling event. They called it Devils on the Run. It was a multi-city tour across the United States, showcasing real haunted artifacts collected by the Warrens. The centerpiece? Annabelle herself.
My name is Dan. I'm Chris. We're from NESPR, New England Society for Psychic Research, and we're coming to New Orleans, coming soon. And we're bringing Annabelle with us. So if you want to come see Annabelle, follow the link below and get your ticket.
But this wasn't a circus. It wasn't entertainment. It was a warning. Dan Rivera was the tour's spiritual lead and the only handler allowed to physically move Annabelle's case. He wore gloves with both hands. At every stop, a priest performed blessings over the room and artifacts.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we move when we need to, how we move the infamous and haunted Annabelle doll.
He repeatedly reminded audiences never to mock or touch the doll's enclosure. He didn't need to shout. He just looked you in the eyes, and you knew he was serious. Attendees at the tour described Dan as calm, reverent, and deeply protective of the doll. Some came for curiosity, others came in fear, all left with something to think about. Each city sold hundreds of tickets. At every stop, people lined up to take photos from a distance. In photos and videos, Annabelle never left her case. Her arms stayed folded. The sign stayed taped to the front. Warning, positively do not open. But, even locked away, people said they felt something watching them. And Dan? He never laughed. He never joked. He treated her like something sacred, or something deadly. In several TikTok videos, he addressed viewers directly, warning not to replicate rituals or summonings involving Annabelle. And then, the tour reached Gettysburg. On July 13th, 2025, Dan Rivera had just finished one of the biggest stops on the Devils on the Run tour in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The event was sold out. Attendees described Rivera as calm, informative, and focused. There was no sign anything was wrong. He was laughing with guests, making final rounds, double-checking Annabelle Ann's case. Later that evening, Rivera returned to his hotel. He was found unresponsive in his room sometime that night. Emergency crews were called, CPR was administered, but Dan Rivera was pronounced dead at the scene. He's just 54 years old. Pennsylvania State Police confirmed there was nothing suspicious or criminal at the scene. An autopsy was scheduled. At the time of reporting, no cause of death had been publicly confirmed. No drugs, no crash, no violence, just silence. The next morning, through official NESPR channels, the paranormal community was stunned. How could this happen? A man so cautious, so careful.
Taken hours after carrying the most feared object in paranormal history. Colleagues and fans flooded comment sections with condolences and disbelief. And beneath the shock, there was a chill. Because whether you believe in curses or not, this death felt wrong. The morning after Dan Rivera's death, NESPR shared the news with the world. The statement called Dan our brother, our friend, and praised his dedication, knowledge, and faith. They said Dan had taught, protected, and inspired thousands, both in person and online. Social media was flooded with comments. Thousands of fans, fellow investigators, and former military colleagues expressing grief, disbelief, and fear. The paranormal community is used to strange things, to stories, to shadows and knocks in the dark. But this felt different. Comments ranged from heartfelt tributes to expressions of dread. Some openly asked, "Did Annabelle take him?" Despite the tragedy, NESPR confirmed that the tour would continue, saying it's what Dan would have wanted. To honor him, the next stops opened with a moment of silence. But the atmosphere had changed. People didn't just want to see Annabelle anymore. They wanted to understand what took Dan. Because whether Dan's death was a medical event or something darker, one thing became clear. The danger no longer felt distant. It felt real. But when you carry something like Annabelle, when your entire work is rooted in the energy of darkness, what does that do to a man over time? Many paranormal investigators report exhaustion, nightmares, unexplained illnesses.
Film in Demon House, I was always sick. I was sick every single time of year. And if you watch the film, you'll notice I feel different. I seem different. I was always sick when I was at film in the Demon House and at the house. Always tired. I never.
In one study, clinical psychologists categorize belief in hauntings as a stress-amplifying experience, especially for practitioners exposed to emotionally charged cases. Dan never said he was afraid, but he never said he was immune either. He carried Annabelle's case carefully, warned people, prayed, then carried her again, until one day, he didn't. The medical reports are still pending, but some things don't show up on an autopsy. Belief is powerful, whether in God or evil, or something that lives behind the button eyes of a doll. And when belief meets fear, something awakens. You don't have to believe in evil.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Ghost City Tours podcast. Today we are joined by a panel of guests from the New England Society for Psychic Research. With us, we have Dan Rivera, Chris Galoran, and Tony Spera. And I'm also here with our co-host, Tim Nealon. So
I like
welcome.
that you call me a co-host. I'm not the host.
I'm owning this one.
Right. Good. This is your show now.
So today we are going to be talking about some particular characters in the paranormal world. One of them being the doll Annabelle that is going to be making an appearance at our storefront in New Orleans. And we just kind of want to get to know, how did you all get into this, and how did you get interested in this, and kind of what drives you to be part of this community.
Yeah, so I think with that, if you guys want to go around, let's start with you, Dan. We've been chatting for a little bit, so I got a pretty good feel for who you guys are. But just in case our audience doesn't know who you guys are, let's give them a little introduction.
My name is Dan Rivera. I'm the senior lead investigator for the Rainforest Group, Limited Society for Psychic Research. My job here, as well as Chris and Tony, issues. So in order to keep this alive and keep telling Ed and Lorraine's story and also the stories of the objects inside that museum, I built this case to Annabelle in. Now, when I built this case, I infused the case with holy water and holy oil.
Mhm.
3 crosses are on the case, plus 2 St. Michael plaques. And behind Annabelle, behind the felt, inscribed in the wood behind her, is the Lord's Prayer. And then we did a couple binding rituals that contains whatever is attached to Annabelle within that case. And then, other than that, our job here is just to keep, the Warrens' name alive and continue doing their work with the investigations, the integrity of the museum. And Tony's given me that, that opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And I take that, to heart when they allowed me to be a big part of this. So now I'll leave it to Tony.
Tony Spera, the director of the New England Society for Psychic Research, and the son of Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I've been working with Ed and Lorraine since the early 1980s. I learned everything that I know about the paranormal realm from them. Ed was a fantastic mentor to me, and probably the best paranormal researcher I've ever met. And Lorraine, one of the best psychics that I've ever known. But I wanted to continue on with this because Lorraine wanted us to keep the legend alive of Ed and Lorraine and all their fantastic work. I remember one time when I asked Ed and Lorraine, when are you guys going to retire? And they said, we're never going to retire. We can't retire. Right. I said, what do you mean to retire? And they said, well, we can't retire because we keep getting phone calls and people need help and we want to help. So until we take our last breath, we're going to help them. So we want to continue that.
That sounds oddly reminiscent of my retirement story recently.
That's why you're here.
Yeah, I'm back. You need my help?
Yeah. The thing is, we're a faith-based society. In other words, when we investigate hauntings, haunted houses, and locations, we do it through our belief in the Lord, our belief in God. We don't do it as an adventure.
Right.
A lot of psychic groups, paranormal groups, they are looking for thrills, a thrill factor. Yeah. We're not. We're looking to help families. That's why we basically do mostly families that are tormented by the paranormal. In other words, demonic influence. So we learned that from Ed and Lorraine. Everything they did was their belief in God. Mm-hmm. Because you can't help a family. Right. Only God can. You're going to direct them to their faith. They have to have faith that the Lord can protect them and can defeat what's going on in their home. And that's what we use. That's when Dan says he blesses the case. He uses St. Michael plaques with the St. Michael prayer attached to them and the Lord's Prayer behind it. You have to remember too that the demonic is a defeated enemy. They feel like a bully that keeps coming around and harass people. If they had total power of the earth, we wouldn't be here today because their main goal, the devil, their main goal is to cause chaos, division. They hate us. Yeah. The devil hates us. So when we say the devil's on the run tour, we're chasing the devil away. The devil is on the run.
I get it now. So Chris, how did you get wrapped up in all this? You're down there quiet in the corner.
I'm friends with Dan, and Dan came on. He took me with him. I'm the one of the skeptic. I also help out at the museum and provide some security with the museum and then letting people in and stuff like that. I'm in the background. I do a lot of stuff in the background, which I'm perfectly fine with.
He's shy when it comes to what he does, but he does a lot of work for us.
Right.
He set up our paracons. He sets in Dan. But he was instrumental in getting us off the ground with our paracons throughout the nation, and Dan also, of course. But Chris is really detail-oriented as a former Eagle Scout.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, that's a badge of honor.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's great to have you guys all and all that stuff. I think where we need to start probably is with the Warrens themselves. I think, obviously you guys know them way better than I do because I don't know them at all, but I obviously know of them. But who are they? There are going to be some people who are listening to the podcast who maybe are familiar with the Conjuring movies themselves, but don't realize that those are based on real people. And quite frankly, I think the movies are kind of silly compared to the work they were doing in real life. And I don't mean this in any bad way against Warrens at all, but I don't like the way Hollywood takes things and like makes them was so far out there that the people who were actually involved in that movie in real life, all of a sudden people's opinion of them start changing because of what Hollywood did to their name, so to say. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, as especially you, Tony. I mean, who were these people?
Yeah, the movies are, of course, are going to sensationalize everything that goes on in the realm, because remember that Hollywood in the movies, they want to make money. Their goal is to make money, and the only way to make money is to entertain people, to have an audience, right?
Right.
So they want to sensationalize it the most that they can within plausibility, for instance. In other words, they just make everything a little step higher than it really happened. But Ed and Lorraine, though, Ed started out living in a haunted house in Bridgeport, Connecticut, when he was between the ages of 5 and 12. And he had such bad experiences in that house that he lived in. It was a 3-family house. He had such bad experiences that when he met Lorraine when he was 16. And he joined the United States Navy on September 7th, 1943, during the war. And he said to Lorraine that he met a year prior, he said, Lorraine, when I get out of the Navy, I'm going to find out if other people have had haunting experiences like I have. And Lorraine looked at him. And I remember Lorraine as a proper Irish Catholic girl. He never spoke about the devil or demonic entities or ghosts in that house, in her house.
Right.
So she looked at Ed and said, Ed, you guys are all reading the same books. There's no such thing as ghosts. And Ed laughed. And then he looked at her and he said, Lorraine, you're saying that to me because you never lived in a haunted house like I did. I know there's such a thing as ghosts. So he joined the Navy. 3.5 years later, he comes home. And that's when he started his journey of trying to learn if other folks have had similar experiences to him. And he used to go to these various locations with Lorraine. And Lorraine was a psychic from the age of 9 years old. But she didn't talk about it. She didn't want to deal with it. When she was in Catholic school at 9 years old, in a all-girls Catholic school, she was standing in line for French class, and she looked behind her and said to her girlfriend, she pointed to the 2 nuns that were near the French class door entry, and one was Mother Superior and one was Sister Joseph. And she turned to her friend and said, hey, look, Sister Joseph's lights, they're brighter than Mother Superior's lights. She was talking about their aura. She was seeing their aura. Right. And Lorraine, of course, at 9 years old, didn't know what an aura was. She thought everybody could see that.
Exactly.
So, and then the Mother Superior overheard her and said, Lorraine, come here. We don't talk about such things here. You're staying after school and praying with me. Right. So that's scared her a little bit, like, I better not talk about this anymore.
Yeah, you're going to get punished.
She used to say, I've never wanted to be different. She always used to say, I never wanted to be different. So she kind of suppressed it. But then when she started to date Ed, and then after he got out of the war, and they went to these haunted locations, she was developing that natural psychic awareness became stronger and stronger, like the more you're around it, the more you're more sensitive to it. So that's how they started. He started investigating haunted houses because he lived in one, and Lorraine followed him along. And then Ed realized by her actions that, geez, my wife has psychic ability also. So that's basically how they started. And Ed never lost interest in the paranormal. He always wanted to help other people.
So are you saying that at first Lorraine was the skeptic in the group, so to say? Like she had psychic abilities, but at the same time was like ghosts aren't real, or?
Yeah, she said there are no such thing as ghosts, Ed. You're all reading the same books.
Right.
And remember, back then, there were no internet. There wasn't any television paranormal programs. Nobody talked about ghosts very much. In fact, when Ed and Lorraine first started to lecture at colleges back in the late 60s, people in the audience during the Q&A, after Ed would speak for 2 hours and Lorraine for 2 hours about ghosts, devils, demons, they'd have hecklers, they'd have people at the Q&A raising their hand after 2 hours of talking about it, and Ed used to get really mad because a guy would raise his hand and go, "Mr. Warren, can I ask you a question?" "Yes, go ahead, sir." "You really believe all this stuff you're talking about? Do you really believe in ghosts?" And Ed would look back at him and say, "That's the biggest insult you can give me.
Right.
I just got been telling you for 2 hours about my experiences and that I believe in ghosts, and now you're asking me that question?" And they'd have hecklers. They'd have people get up and walk out saying this is all BS. There's no such thing as ghosts. What people don't realize is everybody that's walking the earth today is a spirit.
Right.
God is a spirit.
Mm-hmm.
God is a supernatural being. And we are all spirits that God created. So people say, "Well, I don't believe in ghosts." To me, they're actually saying in the background that they don't believe in God.
Right.
Because God is a spirit. And spirits are something that God created, can never be destroyed. So
Right.
when someone passes away, they lose their body, but they don't, their spirit never dies. You never die. I never die. No one dies. Only your body dies.
Well, that sucks. I really wanted to die and just be done with it. But now I'm finding out I gotta
Now
keep.
you gotta live forever, Tim.
Yeah, I gotta live forever now.
You laugh, but you are going to live forever.
Oh,
That's the goal. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I'm just being. I'm in a little bit of a sarcastic mood this morning, but no, I'm totally on the same page. Well, after they had been doing that for a while, they started to get some attention for some of the famous cases that they were covering, right? Like I know. I actually, believe it or not, I don't remember all the specific ones, but they started to do some, and I know they started to get a lot of media attention and stuff. Like, how did that really impact them, or, how did they use that to help get their message out? And then ultimately, was that was all that attention a good or a bad thing?
Well, anytime you can expose the devil, it's a good thing, right?
Right.
So attention was focused on what? Focused on poltergeist activity, demonic activity in a house. And that is what Ed wanted to do, spread the word that devils and demons and ghosts are real, that they're not someone's figment of imagination. So when Ed and Lorraine went for the first time to investigate a bigger case, and that was in Bridgeport, 966 Lindley Street, where over 10,000 onlookers surrounded that little shotgun house, and were standing outside all day long because of all this poltergeist activity that occurred in that house, and the AP wires and the UI wires. Remember, no internet back in '74. It went worldwide for 24 hours, and that's what actually kind of catapulted Ed and Lorraine into notoriety. And then, not long after that, in March of '76, they were called into the Amityville house in Amityville, Long Island, and that really catapulted them into a more of a famous celebrity.
Well, after years of doing this, so, funny enough, I kind of have my own story, but I'll save that for later. I've been, a paranormal investigator, I guess you would call it, for almost 20 years now. I kind of started in Gettysburg, and when we're talking about this world of, demons and the devil and like that aspect of things, there's only been once, maybe twice, and I think the second time was actually the same thing, that I ever encountered something that I think might have been, what we're talking about today. So I'm definitely a believer, because I know what I went through for a couple years after that. And honestly, in the past week, since I've been working on this Annabelle stuff, I shit you not, the amount of stuff going on at my house has went through the roof. And it's not all good either.
Then you come to the office, huh?
Yeah, then I come to the office. I mean, and even on a small scale, I mean, I had that one, and we'll call it a demon. I don't know that that's what it was, but it met all the criteria. For probably a couple of years, I'd say probably 4 or 5 years, I dealt with a lot of stuff. And I know the toll that it took on me, just trying to navigate that for a couple of years. I can't imagine the toll it took on the Warrens, doing this, 50 years, 60 years? So I guess what I'm getting at is this mission that they were on had to have been terribly important to them. And they were people who had conviction, and they were people who believed in what they were doing, because if I had to take that, 4 or 5 years of what I dealt with and expand that over my adult life, I don't know that I could handle the pressure. Like that would, like, how did they handle all of that?
What kept them going, Tim, was their faith. Faith. Without faith, they'd have lost the battle. Without faith, they'd have crumbled.
Yeah.
They had a protection of God's armor around them, and that is your protection. Is your faith in the Lord, that the Lord will protect you from these things. Remember I said that the devil is out to destroy us? But God won't allow that. If God allowed the devil to destroy us, there wouldn't be anybody left on earth.
Right.
Because the devil doesn't want anybody on earth, no one, to join God in heaven.
Right.
Because they can't, and they're jealous of that. And they hate anything that's created in God's image, and that's us. It's a hated image to the demonic. But Ed and Lorraine had this total faith in God. In 1968, Padre Pio passed away, and Lorraine, even back then, used to pray to Padre Pio. And when she was in the house in Amityville, Long Island, during the Amityville days, she was holding a relic of Padre Pio in her hands, and that was her. To her, that was her protection. Praying to Padre Pio and praying to God, and that is the protection. It's like when a cop goes out and he goes to a house that has a barricaded suspect, for instance. The cop's not going to walk in without a gun. He's not going to walk in without a vest, without backup. So, same thing with God. God is your armor. God is your vest. God is your gun. When you go to a demonically infested location, that is your protection. So if you don't have that protection, you're going to be tormented. But Ed and Lorraine had that protection. They knew that with the faith they had. Remember, Lorraine went to a Catholic girls' school, so she learned a lot. And Ed was very religious. He used to pray to the Virgin Mary all the time. In fact, during the war in 1945, the ship went down in 1945, February 5th, in the North Atlantic. It crashed with a tanker, and the tanker exploded. And all the sailors had to jump overboard in the cold, icy Atlantic Ocean. The whole ocean was fire. Right. Fire for as long as you could see. Now, Ed was a lifeguard in civilian life, so he was a good swimmer. His buddy, Salazar, went overboard with everybody else, of course, but he got injured when he hit the water, and he was drowning. Ed swam to Salazar, grabbed him in a lifeguard hold, and started to swim. Then Ed told me, he says, I started to swim, Tom, but then I said to myself, where the heck am I going? Because all there are is a wall of fire. Yeah. He was and there's sharks in the water, a wall of fire. I'm 19 years old, and I'm saying, Lord, scared shitless. What did he do? He prayed to the Virgin Mary. He said, Mother Mary, please save me. Mother Mary, please save me. With that, he said it was like a miracle. The flames parted like this. The flames part, and through the flames comes a rescue raft with two sailors on it, coming right towards Ed. Ed sees that. He says, my prayers are answered. The sailors pull up the raft. He hands off Salazar, the young man, to the rescuers, right? Now Ed says, I'm all set. I'm going to get saved. The other behind the first sailor says, leave him in the water. Let's go. That tanker's going to blow again. Let's go. Right. And Ed says, he's told, Ed relates it to me. He says, I'm in the water like this. I'm saying, I'm going to die right here. Right in this frozen Atlantic water, I'm going to die right here. Mother Mary, please save me. The other sailor behind him says, I'll never leave a man in the water. And he grabs Ed's arm and pulls him to safety. Nice. So, is it faith work? I think so. I mean, he prayed to the Virgin Mary and he was saved.
You were talking about being infected, on cases, and it's okay to step back. He's got to step back. I need to get myself, and it affects as well. I mean, Lorraine was affected, and she was out of commission for a while. She always came back, but yeah, I mean, it's okay as an investigator, and especially when you're helping clients and stuff like that. I'm not talking about going to these places for entertainment purposes, looking for ghosts. I'm talking about families. It's okay to step back. I mean, it's important to, because if you don't,
it takes
a toll on you.
Yeah, it takes a psychological toll on you. Yeah. Because you're dealing. I mean, I can imagine the work a psychologist goes through in dealing with an individual and hearing these stories, and then the battle of them, relying on other people to solve their problems and not taking accountability for themselves. So you take all that on, and it does. It wears you down. And, and that's why we do have to take a step back. We do have to regroup and build our armor again, because it weakens you.
Yeah.
That's how the demonic works. It wants to weaken you. So we have to